A chosen woman walks alone, not out of pride, but purpose. Her silence holds thunder. She climbs while others sleep, dares where others doubt. She is not lonely, she is aligned. Her walk is not empty, it is sacred. She walks alone because her calling is louder than the world's applause. She was never made for the crowd, not because she thought herself superior, but because the whisper over her life was never spoken in a language the world could understand. There is a hush around her spirit, a reverence wrapped in skin, and a fire that does not burn outwardly, but scorches everything untrue within her. From the moment she first felt out of place in rooms that applauded the inauthentic, she began to understand she was set apart. The chosen woman walks differently because she was created differently. Her life carries a sacred weight that cannot be shared casually or explained neatly. She may sit at tables, smile graciously, laugh when required, but deep down she knows her portion isn't on the plate in front of her. It lies in the assignment stitched into her very being. That assignment calls her to rise when she wants to sleep, to love when she has every reason to shut down, and to stand firm when even the ground beneath her trembles. She doesn't fit because she wasn't made to. Others may see her as distant, too quiet, too intense, too reserved, but what they call aloof is actually alignment. She listens inwardly. She hears a rhythm beating underneath the noise of life. It guides her away from chaos and into calling. And because the call is divine, it is rarely echoed by those around her. There is no map for where she's going. There is no cheering section for where she's called. She must walk with conviction even when doubt bites at her ankles. People often mistake her solitude for sadness, but what they don't know is that heaven speaks clearest in stillness. She is not alone because she's been abandoned. She's alone because she's been selected. There is a difference. One is a result of rejection, the other of refinement. She has been refined by silence, tested by fire, and pulled away from distractions not as punishment, but preparation. When a woman is chosen, her life becomes less about pleasing and more about purpose. She learns that not every good thing is a God thing. She stops saying yes out of fear and begins saying no out of wisdom. She grows tired of shallow connections, empty pursuits, and glitter-coated lies. The chosen woman seeks depth. She knows she cannot afford to dilute herself to be digestible. Her destiny requires her to remain whole, and wholeness often costs her the company of many. Separation doesn't scare her anymore. She's walked too long with shadows to be afraid of her own. She's been misunderstood so many times that clarity from others no longer fuels her. What fuels her now is truth, not borrowed truth, not inherited truth, but truth dug out from the dark places of her soul. She has cried enough tears to water her own garden. She has sat in the ache long enough to learn the language of healing. And now she wears her peace like a crown, unbothered, unapologetic, unshakable. You may see her walking with her head high and think she's arrogant. But look closer. That's not arrogance, it's awareness. She is aware of what she carries. She is aware that dimming her light won't comfort those who have chosen to remain in shadows. She is aware that her presence disrupts the performance of the inauthentic, and she refuses to apologize for being real in a world that rewards masks. She's not waiting for someone to rescue her. She's not hoping to be chosen, for she already is. Her worth isn't up for debate. It's already been declared. She doesn't chase, she doesn't beg, she doesn't compromise her essence to keep temporary comfort. That's because she knows the divine assignment comes with divine timing, divine connections, and divine outcomes. She's no longer chasing alignment, she is living in it. And even when her knees shake and her heart breaks, she keeps moving. Because this isn't just a journey, it's a covenant. She walks in the name of every silenced voice, every dismissed truth, every woman who was told she was too much. She is the evidence that sacred callings often come wrapped in quiet rebellion and holy fire. And so, she walks alone, not because no one will walk with her, but because the path was carved for her feet, and her feet alone. There is a sacred silence that surrounds the chosen woman, not born of loneliness, but of deep knowing. Solitude is not her burden, it is her sharpening stone. When the world gets loud and the voices of others grow intrusive, she retreats, not out of fear, but to remember who she is beneath the noise. In that quiet, she doesn't shrink, she strengthens. There, where no one watches and no one applauds, she learns the language of her soul. She has discovered that the most powerful transformation does not happen in crowds. It happens in corners. It happens in the still spaces where the heart is exposed and truth has no place to hide. The chosen woman understands that solitude is not a punishment. It is a privilege. It is the place where the masks fall, the mirrors speak, and the soul stands bare. In those moments, she does not pretend, does not perform, she simply becomes. There is a divine clarity that comes when she steps away. The noise of others' expectations, the pressure to please, the distraction of empty approval, all of it fades. And what's left is raw, real, and undeniable, her calling, her voice, her strength. Solitude becomes her sanctuary, not because she desires isolation, but because it is where she remembers the sound of her own spirit. It is where she sharpens her senses, where her discernment awakens and her wisdom deepens. Most people run from being alone. They fill the silence with anything they can find: people, screens, noise, because they are afraid of what they'll hear when everything else goes quiet. But the chosen woman does not fear her own voice. She listens to it. She studies it. She allows it to speak truths the world cannot offer. In solitude, she meets her shadows and does not flinch. She learns to hold both her softness and her strength without shame. And it is in that very space, away from performance and perception, that she becomes dangerous in the most divine way. Solitude teaches her to trust herself, to rely on no one for validation, to stand rooted in her own essence. She no longer asks for permission to exist loudly, nor does she apologize for being too deep in a world that glorifies shallow. She has tasted the richness of her own thoughts, her own prayers, her own stillness. That taste has made her free. Others may not understand her need to withdraw. They may call her distant, cold, mysterious, but they do not see what happens in the quiet. They do not witness the sacred rituals of her rising. They do not know that she lights candles for her soul, that she sits with her pain like a trusted friend, that she digs through the layers of her heart like a woman on a mission to unearth gold. They do not see her sharpening, not her blade, but her spirit. And with every hour spent alone, she becomes more aligned. She becomes more precise in her purpose, more grounded in her decisions. Her boundaries grow firmer, her yes more intentional, her no more unapologetic. She doesn't beg for company. She doesn't chase after closeness for the sake of proximity. She knows that some closeness is a cage in disguise. She chooses the kind of solitude that sets her soul on fire and leaves her glowing from the inside out. Because when a woman has been alone and not broken by it, but built by it, she becomes unshakable. She is not seduced by empty attention, not weakened by absence. She is fueled by the knowledge that her peace is not dependent on anyone else's presence. And that kind of woman, one who can walk with herself and be whole, is rare and therefore often misunderstood. But she doesn't mind the misunderstanding. She doesn't need to explain her solitude. She has already explained it to herself. She knows that solitude is where her spirit is sharpened into a weapon of light, where her wounds become wisdom, and where her silence speaks louder than any crowd ever could. She walks back into the world not empty, but overflowing, with clarity, with conviction, and with a calm that cannot be shaken. Solitude didn't steal from her. It saved her. It shaped her. It set her apart. There comes a moment in every chosen woman's life when the places that once comforted her begin to feel too small. The conversations that once entertained her now seem hollow. The rooms that once celebrated her now feel suffocating. It's not arrogance. It's not pride. It's growth. She no longer fits into the molds that once held her because her spirit has expanded beyond the boundaries that used to define her. She has outgrown the familiar, not because she wants to leave, but because she can no longer stay. Familiar spaces once felt like home, full of recognition, routine, and roles she had learned to play well. But with every evolution, with every deepening of her self-awareness, those same spaces began to echo with a quiet discomfort. The jokes that used to make her laugh now feel tired. The company she once cherished now feels like noise. She starts to feel like a stranger in rooms that once knew her name. And that is when she realizes her growth has made her unrecognizable to her past. Outgrowing familiar spaces is not a sudden shift. It's a slow unraveling, a quiet noticing. It's the internal pull that says, you've learned all you were meant to here. She may resist it at first. She may cling to what she knows, to what is safe, to the faces she's grown up with and the places she's memorized. But eventually, her soul begins to ache, not from loneliness, but from stagnation. Staying becomes heavier than leaving. The chosen woman understands that comfort is not always the goal. Growth demands discomfort. It requires stepping into unknown territory, into rooms where she is not the loudest, not the brightest, not the most celebrated, but where she is stretched. It requires her to shed the skin of the girl she used to be and walk, unguarded, into the woman she is becoming. That walk often leads her away from circles that no longer reflect who she is. People may not understand. They may say she's changed, that she thinks she's better, that she's distant. But she is not trying to be better than anyone. She is simply trying to be better than she was. She is not turning her back on love. She is turning her face toward growth. There is a difference. A woman can love where she came from and still know she can't stay there. She can hold gratitude in one hand and her evolving truth in the other. When she outgrows familiar spaces, she also outgrows familiar expectations. She no longer plays small to keep others comfortable. She stops explaining herself to be understood. She no longer bends to fit into shapes that were never made for her. That kind of freedom is costly. It often means walking away from what is easy in pursuit of what is necessary. It means losing relationships that were once everything to her because now they stand in the way of who she's becoming. She learns to travel light, to carry only what nourishes her soul and leaves behind what drains it. She may mourn the loss of the old the way one mourns a childhood home full of memories, but no longer where she belongs. And in that mourning, she honors her journey. She does not pretend the past didn't shape her. She simply refuses to let it confine her. The chosen woman understands that outgrowing is a sacred sign. It is the soul's way of saying, you are ready. Ready for deeper purpose, higher alignment, and more honest connections. She no longer stays out of obligation. She no longer settles out of fear. She moves forward because the cost of staying small is too high. With each step into unfamiliar ground, she builds new spaces, ones that match her frequency, that challenge her mind, that honor her heart. And though it may take time to find her new tribe, her new rhythm, her new environment, she walks with peace. Because she knows that true belonging doesn't come from staying where you are expected, it comes from going where you are called. Outgrowing familiar spaces is not the end of something. It is the beginning of everything. She was never meant to be caged in comfort. She was made to evolve, to stretch, to soar. And no matter how many times she has to leave what once felt like home, she trusts that every departure is a step closer to her most authentic self. She sees what others cannot, and that alone sets her apart. Her vision stretches beyond the surface, past the obvious, into the realm of what could be. And that kind of sight unsettles those who've built their lives on what is. The chosen woman walks with eyes full of purpose, carrying ideas that outgrow rooms and dreams that stretch higher than the ceiling of the ordinary. But with that gift comes misunderstanding, resistance, and isolation, not because she's wrong, but because she's ahead. Ordinary is safe. It follows a path paved by permission and applause. But her vision doesn't ask for approval. It isn't shaped by trends or tethered to what's already been done. It is disruptive by nature, courageous by design. Her ideas challenge comfort. Her ambition shakes silence, and her clarity often feels like confrontation to those who've grown complacent. She doesn't have to speak loudly. Her very presence says, there is more, and for some, that is threatening. She walks into rooms not seeking attention, but bringing shift. She doesn't do things for show. She does them for substance. And people feel that. They feel it in the way she listens deeply, thinks deliberately, moves differently. Her standards are not just personal, they are spiritual. She doesn't lower her expectations to avoid offending others. She rises and in doing so, exposes what others have chosen to ignore in themselves. Her vision becomes a mirror, and not everyone is ready to face their reflection. She dreams in dimensions others don't know exist yet. She sees outcomes that haven't been imagined. She hears the future in the quiet hum of the present. And because of that, she is often called too intense, too much, too focused. But that's only because mediocrity has never seen a woman who doesn't need external direction to move forward. Her compass is internal. Her mission is eternal. She doesn't need everyone to believe in her vision, only to not block the way. And still, they try. They question her timing, her motives, her process. They whisper behind her back, doubting what they're too limited to understand. But she has learned that resistance is confirmation. She knows that if her vision were comfortable, everyone would rally behind it. But comfort does not create revolutions. Safety does not birth greatness. And so she keeps building even in silence, especially in silence, because she knows that the extraordinary always begins in solitude. She carries her vision like sacred fire, tending to it, protecting it, refusing to let it go dim for the sake of fitting in. She understands that some people only applaud what they recognize, and visionaries are rarely recognizable in the beginning. They are too raw, too bold, too unshaped by conformity. But she does not shrink. She does not wait for the world to catch up before she steps forward. She walks even when the path is unclear, even when the room grows cold. Because her vision is not optional, it is ordained. There is power in a woman who sees farther than what is handed to her. There is danger in a woman who believes in her destiny more than in the distractions around her. She is that woman. She no longer explains what she sees to those committed to blindness. She no longer waters down her message to be digestible. She speaks truth, not for applause, but for alignment. And when her voice shakes, she speaks anyway, because the call is louder than the fear. The ordinary will always try to cage what it cannot comprehend, but the chosen woman has learned to fly anyway. She has learned that her vision is her responsibility, and no amount of criticism can cancel what was crafted inside her spirit. She is not here to be palatable. She is here to be purposeful. She's not chasing validation. She's chasing vision, and that chase demands her full self, her full truth, her full fire. So when they stare, when they whisper, when they pull away, she lets them. Not because she doesn't care, but because she no longer needs to be understood to be unstoppable. Her vision may intimidate the ordinary, but it inspires the extraordinary. And that is where she belongs. Not in spaces where she has to hide her sight, but in places where her vision is seen as seed. She is not here to maintain what is. She is here to birth what's next. There comes a moment in a chosen woman's life when the approval she once craved begins to feel like a chain. She no longer waits for applause, validation, or nods of acceptance to breathe freely. She learns that loyalty to self is not selfish, it is sacred. She has bent for too long, folded herself into too many shapes to be digestible, agreeable, unthreatening. But now she chooses to stand in her full form, even if that means standing alone. She understands the cost of betraying herself. She has worn the smile that didn't match her spirit. She has said yes when everything inside her whispered no. She has stayed in rooms that drained her just to keep from being called difficult. She's kept quiet to be polite, softened her truth to keep the peace. But over time, she realized that peace without authenticity is just performance. And performance is exhausting. So, she put down the script and picked up her soul. The chosen woman no longer plays roles written by other people's expectations. She rewrites the narrative in her own ink, guided not by the need to be liked, but by the need to be true. That truth isn't always easy. It comes with loss. It comes with silence. It comes with people pulling away, offended by the very boundaries that protect her. But she no longer makes herself small to fit into containers she has outgrown. She chooses herself even when it's inconvenient, even when it's uncomfortable. Approval is fleeting. It shifts with mood, opinion, insecurity. But loyalty to self is rooted. It anchors her when everything else is shifting. She doesn't follow trends. She follows truth. She doesn't chase applause. She chases alignment. And she has learned that not everyone will celebrate her choosing herself, because many are still afraid to choose themselves. But she does it anyway, not to rebel, but to remember who she was before the world taught her to seek permission. She no longer needs to be understood to feel whole. She no longer requires agreement to feel grounded. She's no longer moved by the fear of disappointing others, because she has seen what happens when she disappoints herself to make others comfortable. That kind of pain runs deep. It creates fractures that no amount of external praise can fill. So now, when faced with the choice between approval and authenticity, she chooses the latter, even if it costs her the former. And in choosing herself, she gives others permission to do the same. Her life becomes a quiet revolution. She is no longer available for roles that require her to disappear. No longer interested in friendships that feed on her silence. No longer willing to participate in dynamics where she must dim her light so others don't feel overshadowed. She is not shining to outshine. She is shining to survive. Loyalty to self is not about arrogance. It's about honor. She honors her boundaries, her energy, her voice. She no longer feels guilty for resting, for saying no, for walking away. She has nothing to prove and everything to protect. Her peace is no longer negotiable. Her truth is no longer hidden, and her worth is no longer up for debate. This kind of loyalty is fierce. It is quiet but unshakable. It is what keeps her steady when the world wavers. She doesn't chase belonging in spaces that require her to betray herself. She waits, she prays, she walks. And the spaces that are meant for her begin to open, spaces where she can exhale, where she can speak without shrinking, where she can exist without editing herself. She's not afraid to be the villain in someone else's story if it means being the hero in her own. She's not here to be palatable. She's here to be powerful. And power does not come from being liked. It comes from being loyal to the woman within, the one who knows, the one who has endured, the one who refuses to abandon herself for the sake of acceptance. And so she walks with clarity, she walks with intention, and even when the path is lonely, she does not waver, because approval may open doors, but loyalty to self builds kingdoms, and she was never meant to beg for space, she was meant to claim it. The chosen woman walks with a quiet heaviness that others cannot see. There is a gravity in her step, not born of burden, but of purpose. Destiny doesn't arrive wrapped in comfort or crowd-pleasing paths. It comes as a fire that calls her to rise, to keep going, to carry what no one else can carry. That weight is hers alone, not because she chose it, but because it chose her. And once destiny marks her, she is never the same. There are no instructions handed out with the calling, no roadmaps, no signposts, no applause, just the deep knowing that her life is not hers to waste. She feels it when she wakes up in the middle of the night with ideas too big for small minds. She feels it when silence speaks louder than words, when the world tells her to rest, but her soul tells her to build. She carries visions too sacred to be shared, dreams too detailed to be diluted, and battles too complex to be explained. And so she walks alone, not because she desires loneliness, but because she has been assigned a path that only her feet can travel. People often wonder why she seems distant, why she doesn't linger in places that others find comfort in. But what they don't know is that she's carrying something heavy, something holy. She has to be intentional with her energy, deliberate with her steps. One wrong alignment could delay everything she's been called to do. She has no time for distractions dressed as opportunities, no space for relationships that only love the surface of her. Her time, her spirit, her calling, they are sacred ground now. And though she is strong, she is not without ache. There are days she longs to set the weight down, days when she wishes someone else could understand the silent war she fights, the pressure she endures, the resilience she must summon just to keep going. But she also knows that some things are not meant to be lightened. They are meant to strengthen her as she carries them. Destiny doesn't ask for comfort, it asks for courage. There are no shortcuts on her journey, no detours that don't cost something. The road she walks requires sacrifice. It has asked her to let go of people she loved deeply, to walk away from what was good to reach what is great, to trade safety for significance. Every elevation has demanded an expiration. Every new level has required her to leave behind a version of herself that once felt essential. And that shedding is never easy. But she does it again and again because her spirit remembers what her flesh sometimes forgets. This isn't just about her. Her destiny is tied to others, those she will heal, teach, awaken, inspire. The weight she carries isn't just her own healing, it's the legacy she will leave behind. And because of that, she cannot afford to compromise. She cannot afford to break beneath the expectations of others. She walks alone because no one else was given her vision. No one else was trusted with her fire. There is a certain loneliness that comes with leadership of the soul. When you are chosen, you are called out, set apart, stripped, and shaped. People may admire the outcomes, but few can endure the process, the long nights, the unanswered prayers, The seasons of obscurity where nothing makes sense and everything feels heavy, and yet she rises, not because she isn't tired, but because she knows her rest cannot come from quitting. It must come from trusting. Trusting that the weight she carries is refining her, that the silence is not abandonment, but alignment, that the tears she cries in private are watering a purpose the world will one day witness. And even if no one claps when she arrives, even if no one understands the journey it took to get there, she knows, and knowing is enough. She carries her destiny with grace, not with bitterness, not with pride, but with reverence, because she knows that to be chosen is not just a gift, it is a responsibility. And some responsibilities are not shared, some are simply carried. She may bend, but she will not break. She may be alone, but she is never lost. She is walking in rhythm with something greater, something divine, and that rhythm may be heavy, but it is holy. She walks alone, not out of isolation, but because her path was never meant to be crowded. Every step she takes into silence, into growth, into purpose, is guided by a force deeper than acceptance and louder than fear. She has learned that solitude is not her weakness, but her sanctuary, that outgrowing is not abandonment, but alignment. Her vision stretches beyond the ordinary, and though it often distances her from the familiar, it draws her closer to destiny. She no longer waits to be chosen. She understands now that she is the chosen. And while the world may never fully understand the weight she carries or the fires she walks through, she walks still, bold, soft, wild, steady. Because the chosen woman does not follow the crowd, she follows the call.